Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about the difference between shooting in studio versus shooting on location. You might know I love shooting portrait on location, but I actually shooting in studio a lot too. So based on my experience, shooting on studio and shooting on location, they kind of same, but they're very different too. Let me explain. So what I mean by they're same is because when you're shooting in studio, or on location, you're basically dealing with three different type of lights. You're dealing with the key light, the field light, the rim light. It doesn't mean you need to use the three lights. Sometimes you could just use one light to function as two different type of lights. For example, you use one light to work as both the key light and the field light. Sometimes you might need to use more than one light to work as a one type of light. You might need like a 2-3 lights to work as a rim light or key light. But the idea is same. You need to deal with all three different. You need to deal with these three different types of light. Not all three lights all the time. Sometimes you probably don't need a rim light. But that's the part that they're quite similar. The difference is when you're shooting in studio, you usually have the full control of all the lighting. I'm talking about now using room ambient as part of the lighting source. I'm talking about studio lighting all the way. You just use your studio lights to control all three lights. But this is very different when you're shooting on location, because when you're shooting on location, there's one thing you need to deal with, no matter you like it or not, that is the ambient. So if you think, if you have like a go-to lighting setup in studio, and then you think you can, I just gonna move my go-to lighting setup, studio lighting setup on location, and then I'll get the same effect, you're probably gonna be disappointed. Let me explain why. So the first thing is, when you shooting in studio, you have a full control, which means like you don't need any extra lights. You already got the key light, field light, and rim light covered. But once you move this setup to a location, and there's an actual light you gotta deal with, that's the ambient. It's almost like you're shooting in studio and someone just add an extra flash to it. And this ambient, you cannot just treat it as a flash by just turn it off. You cannot turn it off. So you basically have one option left, which is you just have to overpower it. And that's why we see so many portrait photography, people using off-camera flash, and they always underexpose their ambient because they're shooting on location but still think as a studio portrait photographer. So this will bring us some problems. The major one will be because the exposure between your background and your subject is quite different because you underexpose the background, and then it might not look very natural. Like you might feel there's some disconnect between your subject and your background, so it doesn't feels like they belong to each other. So what I mean by that basically is your photo might look flashy. So talking about the flashy look, I released an online course talking about how to get a natural look using artificial light on location. That's the most comprehensive course I've ever done. It have lots of examples, and it breaks down my workflow step by step. You will see lots of examples using artificial light on different locations and blending with different quality of ambient light, and you will see the sample photos from the test shot all the way to finished one. So I highly recommend that course if you want to learn how to get a natural look using artificial light. I'll leave a link on the description and check it out. Okay, so now let's talk about the second difference between shooting in studio and on location. Many of the lighting techniques that commonly used in studio, they're not so useful on location. Let me give you an example. Feathering the light. So feathering the light basically means you change the angle of your light modifier. So you basically change the area of the light modifier. So you use that to make sure the lighting is only covered desired area on your subject. That's feathering the light. It's commonly used in studio. Many people say, oh, I like feathering the light because it gives me a softer look. For that reason, you get a softer look is because when you're shooting in studio, you change the light, your modifier to a different angle. So there's less light hitting on your subject, and more light hit in the studio, like the wall or something, then it bounce back. So basically you're doing two things. First, you change the light coverage on your subject. The second thing is you add more field light. So that gives you that soft look. But this technique is not going to work well on location, because when you work on location, you have a much larger area. And then there's nowhere to bounce the light. So your feather light only does one thing, which is change the coverage of your light modifier. And it doesn't make sense, because it's such a waste. You just like the lights just like bounce just like a light away from your subject, it's not doing anything. You can easily get the same result, just use a smaller light modifier. And this is a part of the reason I really like using small light modifier on location, for that reason, because it does basically the same thing with a large modifier. Yeah, the second thing is using grid. When you're shooting in studio, grid could be very useful, because we shoot in a small area, and then we don't want the light to cover. We want to make sure the light's only going to cover our subjects, not going to hit on the background. In small space, the most efficient way is just use a grid, so you narrow down the light, so you have better control about it. But when you're shooting on location, usually your subject is very far away from the background. Like it could be a mountain just like 100 miles away. So you're never gonna have to worry about the light spill. So if you still add the grid, and then basically what you do is you just like dim the light. So you need to give more power. This could be, let's say you can get away with 250 watt second light, but now because you add the grid, you have to get like a 500 watt second light. So your setup gonna be much bigger, much heavier. It's more likely to fall. So it's not the most efficient way. So you should just like get rid of the grid when you're shooting on location, because light spill is not a concern. Many times, I shouldn't say not always not a concern. Sometimes when you're shooting on location, you could still at like a small area, and then or maybe your subject is leaning against the wall or something. So that way you do need to worry about the light spill. But if you're using a small light modifier, you can easily just play with the light angle, because the small light modifier, the light is more concentrated. It's less likely to spill away somewhere that you don't want the light to be. All right, so the last difference, I think, is the major one. Like we need to realize that shooting on location versus shooting on studio leads to a completely different type of photo shoot. What I mean by that is like studio, you usually shooting within one area. You could have a like large studio, like 2,000-3,000 square feet studio. Yeah, it's a large studio, but still this is a much smaller area compared with shooting outdoor. So you don't need to move your light a lot. So you can afford to have like a really heavy light setup. You don't have to worry about the wind or weather. You can have those roller stand. You can push the light around much easier. And many times you get your light set up, and then you can shoot a whole bunch without even changing the light. But once you're shooting on location, it's very different. If you go shoot in the park, or you're shooting somewhere downtown, and then you usually want to cover as much area as you want. So you need to move a lot. When I run workshop, I find many of my students, they tend to do a lot of shoot at one spot, but actually that will make you miss a lot of like more interesting shot. Like maybe there's some other like just around the corner there's a much interesting background, and then you just miss that if you just focus on one area. So you want to cover larger area when you're shooting outdoor. So that means those like big, heavy, complicated lighting setup is not going to work very well when you're shooting on location. Like you have like this huge boom arm, roller stand, and then you want to drag them in the park or on the street, and that doesn't sound very easy, something easy to do. The other thing is many light stands are designed for working studio only. They're not designed to work on location. For example, like if you how you're gonna put a roller stand on stairs, or on a pile of rock, or sandy beach, or on logs. Even the C-stand is not working well with that. The studio light stand was designed to be heavier, but with a smaller footprint, because it was designed with the idea is like the studio is a smaller space. But when you're shooting on location, you want the opposite. You want the light stand to be lighter, It's easier for you to carry, but have a larger footprint, so it's a stabler. So like what I said, it's a very different type of photo shoot. So don't you don't want to like carry 3-4 lights each on a different light stand and then bring them outdoor, and then it's gonna take you a long time to set up, and every time you move location, it's just such a hassle to move things around. You also gotta considering the weather, the temperature, and then your ambient might keep changing. Maybe is you're shooting under the shade, then now you move under the sun, then you need to change your lighting setup. Both the light output and the angle, the distance all need to change. You need to do a lot of adjustment. So you don't want to do like a lot of adjustment on those heavy light stands. You need your light setup much lighter, much simpler. So what I recommend to do is when you're shooting on location, you just like deal with one light stand. You don't even want to deal with 2 light stands. It's just too much. It's like one hand carry the camera, the other hand carry the light stand. So it's very easy for you to adjust. And then you can attach 2 lights to the same light stand, so they give you more flexibility in terms of your lighting setup. But still, you without the compromise of being more mobile. Yeah. So like what I said, this is a very different type of photo shoot. So don't think you can just like duplicate whatever you do in studio and move on outdoor, and then you will have the same experience. It'll be very different. So let's just go through some sample images so you can better understand what I mean. Let's first take a look at some studio photos. So see here. So this typical studio setup. Whenever you're shooting in studio or on location, you deal with the same 3 different type of lighting. You have the rim light here, and then you have the key light, and then you have the fill light. And then in studio with darker background, you're gonna make sure the light's only gonna hit on your subjects. It's not gonna hit on the background, or you wanna create this beautiful gradient in the background. So normally the way is you're gonna use grid. And then you might need to feather in light to make sure the key light on your subject's not too harsh. Also give it a softer look. So these are commonly used lighting techniques in studio, but these techniques just not going to work on location. Same thing you can see here. So the lighting in the background is well controlled, and we have the rim light, we have the key light, we have the fill light. The fill light was using both the light and the reflector, so we have multiple light modifier to function as one type of light. Yeah, like what I said, like sometimes you need like more than 1 light to work as a one type of light. So this is an example. Yeah, again, this is use a grid because I don't want the light to spill on the background. And this is what I actually shot was like a 5-foot octet. So again, same thing. Like this is a mix of both the high key and the low key. So the low key grid usually is the way to go. The high key, and so it's better. So you don't have to worry about too much about light spill, but you still need to deal with the fill light and the key light, things like that. Yeah. So yeah, all example you can see that the studio lighting setup. Then like the 3 different types of lighting: the rim light, the key light, the fill light, right? Now let's take a look at the photos that were taken on location. So yeah, when we talk about location, it doesn't matter if it's outdoor location or indoor location. I just call them in general on location. Basically what it means is not a studio setup. Yeah, so this is like indoor setting, but this is on location. This is like this was done with a beauty dish and silver reflector. So see, now the lighting changed a lot. I don't use the big setup anymore, and my light modifier much smaller. I can now just overkill all the ambience. See that strong backlighting right here? Very strong backlighting. If I want to kill that backlighting, what's the ambient gonna look like? It's gonna turn completely dark. So all my studio lighting setups not gonna work at all on this type of lighting setup, right? Same thing, like very strong backlighting. Don't think you can just like overkill it and then just move your studio setup there. Yeah, it's just not gonna work. Same thing, very strong backlighting from the sun. So shooting on location is you use ambient to function as part of the 3 lights and then work together. That's what we mean about blending. Blending is not just like you blending certain amount of your light with a certain amount of ambient light together. It's not just about the amount, it's also about the type, the function of the light. Between the key light, the field light, the rim light, these three functions, you use your strobe light and the ambient to work together to fulfill these three functions. So that's the blending from the function perspective. See, this serial photo shoot is an example. Like this was shooting in downtown Vancouver in the area called Granville Island. There are so many different backgrounds you can choose from. Like I can use the city as a background. I can play with the contrast. Use these concrete structure to play with my composition, and then I can play with very strong backlighting. So this is use the concrete as the composition, play with the composition, and the sun's coming from different angle. This sun's used working as the kicker light coming from the back, this sun coming from the side. The sun gonna work both as the key light and the rim light, and then my strobe light just gonna work together with sun as the key light. See, this is a very strong backlighting, subtle backlighting, different background, and then when she turned to the other side, and then I need to change my lighting setup, and then I move to another location, and then I put another location. So what I mean by that, so what I'm trying to showing you here is, when you're shooting on location, you need to move around a lot. And so some of the ground is not even like an even surface. Like this is actually slopes going down. If you put a roller stand here, so what's gonna happen, right? If you have like a 4 or 5 light stands, and then every time you change your shooting location within this area, and then you have to move 4 or 5 light stands, how efficient your photo shoot gonna be? So, and don't think if you're not carrying too many gears, your result gonna be sacrificed. And that's not the case. You can get totally studio quality of light and plus a very natural look with a smaller gear. Yeah. So the more is not always the better when you're shooting on location. So take a look at this. See, very different lighting setup. Like in studio, I'm not gonna use a single beauty dish ever as one light, but on location I can totally do that because I can play with the ambient. And look at this location. Again, you don't want to use a C-stand or any heavy light setup. The other thing is, if I'm shooting studio, if she's against this background, a certain like a seamless paper background, and then I use this light, I could have some problem with the light spill, and then I don't have to worry about that because it's such a large area. I don't have to worry about if there's a wall somewhere, the light gonna hit the wall, bounce back to her, and then gonna mess up with my shadows, or have some impact on my field light. I have no concern about that. So it's a different mindset when you design your lighting when you're shooting on location. Yeah, same thing, like a location like this, like C-stands is just not gonna work. Roller stands is not gonna work. They're just not designed for a location like this. Again, so this is I use a street box. Look at this, like a whole bunch of rocks. You're gonna put your light stand somewhere and then make it work, right? Look at this. I use one silver beauty dish for the whole lighting setup. You can get a natural look. You can get a studio quality of light. You can still have all three light. You have the rim light. You have the key light, and then you expose your you play with your exposure to get right amount of the field light. So you still have all three lights. You can get all three lights with just one light modifier, but it doesn't mean that you use one light to achieve all three different type of lights. It's like you use your strobe light to work together with the ambient to get all three type of lights. That's what we call blending. Okay, that's all I want to cover for today's topic. So if you like the video, subscribe, and then so you can keep on top of all the future videos. If you have any questions, leave a comment, and then I'll try to answer as much as I can. Okay, thank you.